So we've got G major, starts with second finger. So started and ended with second finger on the G. And the natural minor starts on G with the first finger. So just quickly to explain what they're for, the major one, if you're in a major key for your song, in the key of G major, then these are the notes that are going to fit. Whether it's as bass runs, or melodies or fills. If you're in G minor, then the minor scale. So you could be right. So to connect chords with bass notes, what you need to do is think of what scale is the right one to be using for the key that you're in. So if you're playing a song that's in the key of G major, for example, so you might be using chords like G, E minor, C, A minor, D, B minor, those kind of chords. Then the G major scale is the one to use. So in the clip that you just saw, I demonstrated G major scale here. And these notes, they can all be found in different places on the neck, but they can also be found in this key using some open strings. So instead of, if I just do one octave, you could go like this. And you can find them there as well. So experiment with finding the notes in different places, relevant to where your hand happens to be for the chords that you're playing. So if we take an example of maybe changing from a G chord to a C chord, what you could be doing is strumming on the G and then think of 4 bass notes that you want to put in. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're on the C chord. So what I could do is think of the first bass note as being the G, which is here, and the last bass note, the fourth one, as being the C, which is in the chord. So your first bass note comes from the chord you're on without moving, and then the last bass note is when you're on the next chord. So then all I've got to do is fill in the gap in the middle with 2 more bass notes, and they can come from the G major scale. So for example, I could just play an A and a B. So I'd have the G from the G chord, then A, B, and then C bass note as I hit the C chord. So that would be very slowly. And if I wanted to go back from the C to the G, I could just do the same thing in reverse. Now that all sounds good. That A note there is a little bit awkward because it's a bit out of the way when I'm sort of playing here. Especially if I was playing my G with these fingers, which you often would going to a C. So I'm going to replace that A with the open A. So now I've got this going from G to C. Back. And it's even easier if you play a G like that. Let's take another example. Let's say I'm starting on the G again, but I'm going to go to a D chord instead. So that's a very common chord change in the key of G. So now I'm still going to start on my G bass note as the first. I'm still going to stick with 4 notes as well. So the first one's still going to be G. And I've got to get to a D. So I think with the scale again. I can go beyond the D, I can sort of play something like that. But it works best if you can, if possible, to sort of move in one direction between the 2 chords. So from the G bass note to the D bass note, I've got these others. So if you think of the scale again. So I've got an A, a B and a C. And again, they could be played like that. So if I go from the G to the D, I might choose to do the G, the A and the B like I did earlier, but then I'm going to jump into a D bass note for the fourth one. So that'd be like this. Or I could play the first note as the G, maybe miss out the A and do B, C, D. So that'd be this. Or I could miss out the B, so I could do G, A, C, D. Okay, so you get the idea, hopefully. Another quick example, let's say we're on the D and we're going to go to a C. So they're both in the key still. So I'm on the D, here's my D bass note. I want to stick to this 4-note thing if I can for now. So I could play the D and I want to end up at a C, which is here. Well, in the scale, they're next to each other. So you've got the choice here. You can play notes from outside of that kind of spacing there, so still have to be from the scale. So I could play D, maybe A, B, and then land on the C, so that'd be. So I'll demonstrate that. And that works quite well. Or another thing you could try is actually putting in a note that's not really in key. If you think of a D bass note being here, and a C one being there, there's a note in between them that's out of key, it's not in the scale, that note. So it's a wrong note, but you can use it as a passing note. And passing notes can be notes from outside of the key, outside of the scale, that shouldn't really work, but they do because they're a stepping stone between two good notes. So I could play my D, maybe play it, if I want 4 notes, I've got to probably play it twice, and then I'll play the C sharp there and the C. And all of this is just in the key of G major. This works in any key, but you have to establish what the notes are for the scale of that key. So if you're in the key of A major, you need to find an A major scale. For the bass note thing, you just want to stick with the low octave probably, so just 1 octave like that. But because your chords are probably going to be down here, you want to find that scale, those notes down here somewhere, which is easy enough to do. So a quick example, in the key of A, I might be playing from an A chord to a D chord perhaps. So I could do something like this. There's my bass note for the A, there's my bass note for the D. In between I've got B, C sharp. So I'll probably involve those 2 notes. And you'll have heard that kind of thing a lot. Now just to mix it up, I might swap the B and the C sharp around. So something like this. It just gives it a slightly different melody, because that's really what you're doing. You're playing a melody as well as the chords, but just in the bass notes. If you're in the key of G minor, that was the other scale that I did at the beginning in that clip. Well, in G minor, you're probably going to be using mostly bar chords, just because of the nature of the chords that are in that key. So if I take an example of G minor, maybe to D minor and C minor, I could play my D minor there, but I'm going to stick to bar chords for this. Here's the scale. So if my sequence was G minor, C minor, D minor, G minor, I could apply the same thinking. I could just go from the G to the C by thinking, well, what are the notes in between G and C? It's those 2. So I could go. Maybe to go to the D minor, there's the D's there, so it's the next note. And again, I could put a passing note in. That would work. Or I could go beyond the D. Something like that, because that note is in the scale. It's just going beyond the D and then coming back to the D. So that would work as well. And then D minor, back to G minor. I've got a few options, but the scale would be. But just like in the last example, I could go beyond the scale. Do something more complicated like that, as long as you're sticking to the notes from the scale. I'll just do a few examples with those chords. So that's the kind of thing that you can do as long as you stick with notes from the scale, unless it's a passing note, which is usually just in between two notes that are 2 frets apart. There's the passing note. That's the best way that you could use a passing note in this sort of situation. Okay, hope that all makes sense. Please click like if it did and you liked it, and suggest other lessons you'd like to see. Okay, thanks.